In Mexico, drug-related violence is at an all-time high. In 2006, around 6,000 people were murdered. That's more than the number of people killed in Afghanistan in the same year.
The whole country is immersed in a fight between members of organized crime.
We are in the middle of a war, an intensive war.
The drug dealers have more power than the national army.
In this one-hour Vanguard report, we'll look at the fight amongst Mexico's government and its most notorious drug lords. In a society that's caught in the middle.
There is worry, more violence can spread to the other side of the border.
So we are crossing over right now. We are heading from El Paso, Texas, into Juarez, Mexico. We were headed to Juarez, Mexico's most violent city. It's a battleground that doesn't look like one. Looking over the skyline, it seems so peaceful. So it's a little strange and disconcerting to think that in the last 3 months there have been more than 500 drug-related murders. And that's why we came to Juarez. We wanted to try to understand what's going on. Juarez doesn't look like a battleground until you start to see where all the shootings have been going on. Less than a year ago, drug traffickers tried to kill the chief of police of Juarez at this site. They drove past here and fired over 200 bullets. So you can see that some of these bullet holes have been patched up. The chief of police actually survived that incident, but his successor was killed just a few months ago. At this intersection, the director of the prison was killed in his car. We stopped at some of the locations where recent murders have taken place. 2 people here, 5 people there, 1 person here. There were around 1,400 drug-related killings in Juarez in 2008. Almost no corner has been left untouched. It's like a city of death. Everywhere we go, somebody was killed at a gas station, a bar, outside a house. It's crazy.
You cannot walk freely in the streets. If you want to go to a downtown, you cannot go to a mall with your friends as the way before. Why? Because you don't know when the bad guys are going to be there, going to start killing people.
With everything you do, when you go out in the street, there's a sense of stress, an extra stress. So is the one behind me or the one in front of me a drug lord? Is it going to be a shootout just in front of me?
So this right here, the Rio Bravo, is what separates Juarez, Mexico from El Paso, Texas. You can see behind me, there's a Border Patrol truck looking into Mexico. And so they call this the Juarez Plaza. It's one of several plazas which are essentially corridors, drug routes into the United States, and that's what the drug traffickers are fighting for control of. They're fighting for control of the plaza. The main plazas provide easy access to the U.S. interstate highway system, which the cartels use to deliver drugs to the markets that they control in the U.S. The mayor of Juarez was elected at the end of 2007 to bring reform to the city.
Well, the whole country is immersed in a fight between members of organized crime, but a couple of the syndicates have their bases, one of them in Culiacán, Sinaloa, the second one in the city of Juarez. And because this is where they're based at, this is where the war between those groups has been more intense. The drug trade into the U.S. is what causes a lot of the problems in Mexico, because the money that's created by that is not because people from Juarez are consuming drugs, it's because people in the United States are demanding drugs and they flow through the city of Juarez.
One day I went out with a local journalist who's been covering the crime wave in Juarez. So Arturo, what is this radio right here?
This is a scanner, police scanner, and we can hear the codes from police.
We found out about a shooting in the outskirts of town and rushed over. You drive like a police.
Yes, I feel like a police. Disculpe, ¿dónde encontraron al muerto?
¿Ya se fueron?
¿Ya se fueron?
Sí, ya.
Gracias. Oiga, disculpe, ¿dónde fueron? ¿Le encontraron a la persona?
Allí.
Did they take the body away already?
Yes, they're taking still the forensics. ¿Qué fue lo que pasó ahí, disculpe?
Mataron a dos.
A dos. ¿Y ustedes escucharon los balazos?
Ella sí, yo.
Yesterday in the night, he just heard the shots, 2 shots, and then some kid find the body, and there were 2 bodies.
Sounds like an execution.
Yeah.
We got into the site just as the forensics van was taking the bodies away, but Arturo's photographer friends had gotten there a few minutes earlier and were able to document the crime scene. In one video, you can see shell casings on top of a cliff. It looks as if the 2 men were executed there, and then their bodies were thrown into the trash dump below. We just got word that there's been another shooting, this time a police officer. So we're headed back to the neighborhood where we were before.
I think it's here. Yes, perfect. Oye, Ray, ¿dónde está el muertito? ¿Dónde está? ¿Dónde lo mataron? And the dead body, it's inside of the store called Modelorama, LNE.
Do we know if it was a police that was shot?
Yes, it's supposed to be a police.
So this is just another police officer dead. There have been 40 killed so far this year in Juarez. Are scenes like this, people getting killed, something that you see often?
Dice que sí es muy común para ustedes ya estar viendo que están matando gente. ¿No es común?
No es común.
¿No te parece que sea común?
No.
Oh, he said that it's not very often here.
Okay. Thank you, gracias.
Thank you. Ready?
Yeah. So those kids don't talk because they're thugs, right?
Yes, they are part of the gang, so
Right. They don't want to
they
talk.
just lie. Okay, ahí voy para allá.
They're just happening one after another. We just heard that a couple other people might have been killed. One, a very successful businessman. So we're following this news crew to the scene. Do we know who
I think
it
there
is?
are 2 bodies. It's supposed that was bodyguards of this owner, of these people.
Of the owner of this amusement park.
Right. Oh, there is the body? Yes.
It's believed that the owner of this amusement park was injured. He was the target, but he wasn't killed. He was with some bodyguards. There are 2 bodies, 2 dead bodies on this site right now. In the last 4 hours, we've been to 3 different sites, and there have been 5 different people murdered. All in all, a total of 11 people were killed that day in Juarez. Coming up, Mexico's crooked cops and what some people are doing to try to reform the system. You must have a lot of enemies.
A lot of enemies, yes. And every day I have a new one.
Mexico is a popular tourist destination, especially for residents of the U.S. border states. As a kid, I used to travel here with my family on vacation. But fewer tourists are making their way across the border these days. Once bustling streets are now empty. The increase in drug violence has produced a situation where not only tourists but locals are afraid to be on the streets.
Juarez is a city without law. There's no law here.
It's not just that you have to be careful when you go out or that when you're walking around the streets, like maybe something's going to happen to me. It's just that you talk to people and they're just hopeless.
In these days, you can trust. You see a policeman and you feel doubted. That would be in the cartel, that would be a honest policeman.
People have little trust in a police force that's become known for working with and protecting the cartels. When you see all these cops out here, it's hard not to wonder who's a good guy and who's corrupt, because there has been so much corruption in the police world here in Mexico. The police don't have the best reputation here.
They have a very bad reputation. It's important to say it, and it's important to recognize it. It's the highest level of corruption there could be in a police force, and I'm in the process of firing about 400 out of the 1,600 police officers for failing lie detector testing, where we have specifically asked them if they're involved in corruption with organized crime.
Some people blame the rise in violence to power shifts within Mexico's government. For 71 years, Mexico was ruled by one party, the PRI, which maintained order by allowing some cartels to operate as long as they kept their violence out of public sight. But in 2000, the PRI lost power and Mexico ushered in a multi-party democracy. Corrupt elements within the new political parties had ties to different cartels, and the war over control of the drug trade began to escalate. In Tijuana, one of Mexico's most violent cities, I visited the office of Alberto Capella, an outsider and reformer who was brought in to head the police force and to break the ties between the cartels and corrupt officials. Well, you mentioned that you're fighting these two wars, war within the police world and a war within the drug trafficking world. You must have a lot of enemies.
A lot of enemies, yes. And every day I have a new ones. Every year we are losing our space, our liberty, our freedom, because it's in the hands of the criminals.
Capella offered to give us a tour of the city. He showed up at our hotel in a convoy with an entourage. We're heading right now on a patrol. We have one police truck in front of us. We have 2 armored vehicles full of policemen behind us, and we are here in the armored vehicle of Mr. Capella. You can tell by this. It's very thick. Alberto Capella needs this much protection. Just before he took the job as head of Tijuana's police, 20 to 30 armed men came to his house. Capella was alone. His attackers fired 250 rounds into his house, but missed him. Capella, who had only held a gun half a dozen times in his life, fired back and drove them away. And that was 3 days before you officially took the job. Did you have any reservations?
And when they do that, I think maybe they don't like me.
You think?
I don't know, maybe, no?
Oh my gosh.
There's a
What is
killing
that?
in a restaurant. These ones are 4 bodies who we found in.
And so these are all the scenes that you visited?
In the last 2 weeks.
It's just body after body. Capella tried to reform Tijuana's police force by getting rid of more than 100 officers, but the violence didn't stop. The month after we met him, he was fired as police secretary. While killings in Mexico's drug war continue to escalate, kidnappings are also on the rise as criminal groups look for other ways to make money. You were kidnapped.
Yes, I was.
Can you tell me about that experience and what happened?
I spent 83 days with my hands tied up and my feet tied up to an iron bed.
In 2008, the kidnappings in the border area have really reached what I would consider epidemic proportions.
I was laying on the floor, I just couldn't move. The chains that I had, any noise that they would make, it was for sure they were gonna beat me up.
Now, who is doing these kidnappings? Who's responsible?
We believe it's different groups, factions of cartels that either currently exist, drug cartels, or that previously existed. We have had several instances where Americans have been kidnapped in this country and then brought south of the border, held there while the whole ransom process takes place. And that aspect of Americans being kidnapped on American soil is particularly disturbing.
Coming up, weapons of warfare, how guns from the U.S. are helping to fuel narco violence across the border.
The drug cartels in Juarez have advertised openly they will pay $5,000 for a AR-15, AK-47 type rifle, no questions asked. Every day along the U.S.-Mexico border, scenes like this are happening. A car is pulled over and searched. Show me, buddy. Show me. Drugs are recovered. These agents are battling to keep illegal drugs produced in Mexico or transported across Mexico from entering the U.S. To help block smuggling, the U.S. has been building a border fence since the 1990s. It's Mexico. Right through that hole.
So we'll continue on west, and then we'll run into Smuggler's Gulch.
We met Agent Alatorra, who took us on a tour of the border fence in the San Diego sector.
The patches of concrete that you see in the road that we're currently on were all tunnels that were discovered by Border Patrol agents.
So there's so many of them right here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
yeah, and we
6.
just passed 2.
So these are like 6, 7, 8 attempted tunnels.
Exactly. And they figure that it's easy enough, so you know there's quite a few attempts in this area.
As we drove, we saw new construction designed to foil smugglers. Over here, you can see across into Mexico and the pretty flimsy existing border fence, which is why they're building this new one right here. So Agent Alatorra was just saying that in this neighborhood over here, you can see it's pretty run down. The smugglers will pay people here, say $50, give them a cell phone, and have them be lookouts over here so they can call and they can give them intelligence and say, you know, the agents are patrolling, or now it looks like it's a clear time to cross. As we drove on, we saw that even Smuggler's Gulch, a rocky canyon that's been inaccessible to Border Patrol vehicles, is undergoing a massive transformation. So they have basically just knocked out this mountain here.
Yeah, what they did is they scraped off the sides of the canyon and started to push all of the dirt that they're scraping off into the canyon itself. Again, the end result is going to be 1.3 million cubic yards of dirt that they're going to push into this canyon. It makes it easier to install the secondary fence, install the camera systems, and install the lighting, all to try and maintain operational control of our nation's border.
While the U.S. is trying to combat the smuggling of drugs into the country, the Mexican government is trying to keep a different kind of contraband purchased in the U.S. from being smuggled into Mexico. You can see the no gun signs. In Mexico, private citizens are largely barred from possessing guns. Yet, just like illegal drugs in the U.S., there are plenty of guns available to Mexico's warring cartels.
Organized crime goes into the United States and buys arms that they come here and they use against police officers, and they use against army, and they use against each other.
The U.S. federal agency in charge of fighting gun smuggling to Mexico is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
These drug cartels have the money and they can afford these weapons. At least 90% of the weapons recovered in Mexico originate in the United States.
How do you know that? Is that because you've traced them back to the
Exactly.
U.S.?
That's based on the trace information.
So when you're talking about guns from the U.S. going into Mexico, what states are we talking about?
Mainly it's the 4 bordering states, Texas is the main one because Texas is so big. It's the most of their legal guns or guns being illegally trafficked come from Texas.
Texas is one of the few states that permits the sale of assault weapons.
What you see are all legal firearms in the trade.
In Texas, it's legal for U.S. citizens to buy an assault weapon after undergoing a background check. But purchasing weapons for someone else, or say a drug cartel, is called a straw purchase and can get you a minimum of 5 years in federal prison.
What are the 3 things you look out for in a suspicious purchase?
An individual coming in and asking for a firearm that they have no concept what it is. An individual coming in requesting multiple purchase of the same type of firearm. The third is an individual who is obviously, because of their nervousness or lack of understanding, is uncomfortable coming in and making a purchase, and then we question that. And these are usually females who have been offered money to make this purchase.
Guns for sale in Texas can be worth much more in Mexico, even if smuggling them there is a violation of Mexican and U.S. law.
The drug cartels in Juarez have advertised openly they will pay $5,000 for any AR-15, AK-47 type rifle, no questions asked. If somebody will pay you $5,000 for one of these guns up here, what kind of a chance would you take to buy one? Or steal one and try to get it south?
Coming up, we head to the birthplace of narco trafficking in Mexico. So you have the most powerful drug cartels in Mexico, and their families all come from this region, and some of the family members are buried here at the cemetery.
She's telling me that it's not a good idea to stay too long here because people are watching us right now. Okay.
Although Mexico's drug war is largely being fought out in cities like Tijuana and Juarez, because those are the smuggling corridors into the U.S., you could say it started far from the U.S.-Mexico border, in the small Mexican state of Sinaloa. This area is home to the notorious Sinaloa cartel, which is run by Joaquin Guzman, also known as El Chapo, or Shorty. And El Chapo used to run the cartel with his trusted associates, the Beltran Leyva brothers. And even though this area is a notorious drug trafficking region, for a very long time, things were pretty peaceful. The narcos didn't bother the locals didn't bother the narcos, and a lot of people thought that that situation was working and saw this area as a kind of narco paradise. This is one of the nice neighborhoods in Culiacan, and we've been told that many of the residents here are involved in the drug business. Well, there are lots of new big houses going up in this neighborhood, huge mansions. Local economists estimate that narco trafficking is the single biggest industry in Sinaloa, making up 20% of the economy. All around me, you can see this big building boom that's been going on in this city over the past 10 years. And in many ways, these very legitimate businesses have been benefiting from narco money. You have the traffickers and the dealers making lots of money, and they, had to spend it. And so the drug trafficking business, in a way, created this whole narco society. One thing that people like to spend their money on is fancy cars. I hear that Hummers are very popular in Culiacan.
Exactamente, sí. Nosotros ahorita como esta unidad lo estamos vendiendo pues muy bien.
There's a myth that some of the narcos like to drive, big fancy cars. Do you get, a lot of narcos in here buying these cars?
No necesariamente, porque ya ve que aquí hay muchos agricultores. Somos líderes en producción de maíz, tomate, camarón. O sea, tenemos hay mucha diversidad.
The tomatoes are great, the shrimp is great, the corn is great. I just haven't tried the marijuana yet.
También es muy bueno ese de acá, que es el principal productor.
Well, we're the main producer, so it's supposed to be good.
It's supposed to be good. Muchas gracias.
Ándale para servirle.
Muchas gracias, señor.
you could say that this right here is where it all started. In January 2008, one of the Beltran brothers, El Mochomo, was arrested right in front of his house right here. And the Beltran brothers believe that El Chapo set him up. It sparked a split in the Sinaloa organization, and it sparked a huge wave of violence. Oh, wait, there.
What?
Let's not stay here too long.
No, let's go.
Okay, so right here you can see that someone has left him a message. It says, "I love you, Mochomo, I miss you, you're a little girl." The drug war is being fought out on the streets of Culiacan, but the actual cartels come from a remote region of Sinaloa known as the Golden Triangle, where few dare to go. Well, we're about an hour out of the city now, and the area has become a lot more isolated. It's just pretty much wilderness around us. And we also haven't been passing very many cars. We've passed about 5 cars in the last 5 or 10 miles. Another 45 minutes or so, and we arrived in the main town just outside the Golden Triangle. So we just arrived here in Badiraguato, and the region around this town is where virtually all of Mexico's most powerful drug lords come from, including El Chapo. As we were getting our bearings, an army patrol rolled in. It seems like such a small, quaint town, and then you see scenes like this, and it just reminds you about the violence that goes on in this region. We hooked up with Omar, an official in the mayor's office, who agreed to give us a tour of the region. Hi, I'm Lauda. Nice to meet you. These are our police escorts. We are headed out of this main city into one of the smaller towns. Our escort is telling us that the soldiers have been destroying a lot of the marijuana fields in this region, and it's left people struggling to find any source of income. So they've been turning to banditry, which is why we have our police escort to make sure that we can get to the next town safely without getting robbed. But even though the army has recently begun eradicating the marijuana around the village we were in, the authorities hesitate to go farther into the Golden Triangle. We're told that the town where El Chapo and where the Beltran brothers are from are 5-6 hours deep into the mountains. And I asked our escort whether or not there's a police presence in those towns, and he said, no way. He said, those guys and their families, that's the law. The fertile region of Sinaloa has always produced marijuana, but it wasn't until the 80s that drug smuggling in the area became extremely lucrative. During that time, Colombians were cut off from using Florida to smuggle cocaine into the U.S., so they began working with small-time traffickers in Sinaloa to move drugs through Mexico. By the 90s, Mexico's drug families had replaced Colombians as the wealthiest, most powerful cartels in the world. Today, one of the most notorious cartel leaders is El Chapo. Do people here like and support El Chapo?
Sí, claro que sí. Pues es el apoyo que tiene la gente aquí económicamente hablando. Pues a él les ayuda a la gente. Ellos trabajan para él y él les ayuda. O sea,
so those could be family of El Chapo.
O simplemente conocidos que trabajan juntos. Pues.
Then it was time for a lunch break. Got some steak and potatoes going on here. Outside the restaurant, we chatted with a local resident. Me llamo Lauda.
Laura,
Sí.
me llamo Rigo.
Rigo. We heard that the military's eradication of the marijuana has impacted a lot of people here. What do people here think about the military?
Pues se han portado muy mal, dicen partes, han matado gente inocente, así. Se han metido a las casas sin permiso también.
And what about people involved in the drug business, like El Chapo? What do people think about El Chapo?
Pues a muchos pues les ha servido mucho por él ha metido carreteras, la luz y mira un enfermo, lo cura, así, pues opina la gente.
No, lo que pasa es que la casa lo dice, pues, viendo la casa.
So you have the most powerful drug cartels in Mexico, and their families all come from this region, and some of the family members are buried here at the cemetery. Jesus Caro Carrillo, Hector Caro Carrillo, these guys are relatives of the leaders of the Juarez cartel.
She's telling me that this is not a good idea to stay too long here because people are watching us right now.
Okay.
They know we're here, so...
People have seen us come up here.
Yeah.
Time to leave the village?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's happening here is kind of indicative of the situation here in Mexico. We've come here with 4 police escorts, but we're told that we got to get out of here because it's not safe.
We got back to Badiraguato late in the afternoon. For our safety, we had to be out of town before the sun set on us, but we lingered to see the locals coming out to cruise the town square.
This area is so notorious for drug trafficking, but at the same time it seems so innocent. Like people are just driving around in circles in this square for fun. What do most of the people do for work here? So most people in this area are in the marijuana business?
Muchas, sí. La mayoría.
Around the corner, we met a 19-year-old who was in a different line of work, his family's churro business.
You're a young guy. Do you have any friends who have gone to work in the drug business or have wanted to work in the drug business?
La gran mayoría, dado la falta de trabajo y la falta de oportunidades, tienen que orillarse a trabajar en el narcotráfico.
You know, it's been very violent because of the drug situation. Do you know anybody who's been killed or hurt?
Sí, algunos amigos.
¿Muertos?
Sí.
Has it become normal for young men to be dying because of this drug war?
Les gusta el camino fácil y quieren llegar a la riqueza rápidamente. Simple y sencillamente.
Gracias.
Adiós, que les vaya muy bien.
Coming up, as federal troops try to establish control across Mexico, chaos continues.
She's crying. That's her son. That's her son. Leave me alone. That's my son.
In December of 2006, in an attempt to overwhelm the warring cartels, President Felipe Calderón began sending federal troops into different cities across Mexico.
This is a military camp, and you can see these soldiers all around the city of Juarez. They've been dispatched here to try to establish control.
Today, there are more than 40,000 federal troops patrolling the streets of Mexico, but violence has only gotten worse.
Si peleamos contra otro ejército, se siguen reglas. Hay una regla de guerra y hay códigos de honor. Pero en este caso no. En este caso peleamos con gente que no respeta ni a la señora que les dio la vida, entonces mucho menos respeta a nadie más.
We're just walking through this cemetery, and you can see these huge, really intricate mausoleums, and you have to think that you got to have some money to be building these things. When you think of cemeteries, you think of people dying of old age. And at this cemetery, there's one thing that most of these people have in common. They're men and they're young. If you look at the years that they were born, this guy 1983, this guy 1981, over here 1980. You know,
it doesn't seem to stop. You can see all of these graves just ready for another killing. These men behind me building mausoleums. Right here you can see this young man, Lupito, and up in the corner, an AK-47. So there have been more than 1,000 murders this past year in Sinaloa. How many, out of that 1,000, how many of those murders have been solved?
Ninguno. De esos 1,060, 1,070 asesinatos, ninguno de los que está relacionado con narcotráfico se ha aclarado, ni uno solo.
At the morgue in Culiacan, I met a criminalist who gathers evidence to help solve the murders. So you were a criminalist here in Sinaloa. It's been a very violent year, not just here, but in all of Mexico. Has that made your job difficult?
Hoy se estamos viendo un poquito más de violencia, un poquito más fuerte la cuestión de privarse de la vida.
What are some of the ways in which people are being killed? What are the methods being used?
Ahora lo que ha diferenciado es que ahora tenemos muertes colectivas, que tenemos de 3, 4, 5 cadáveres en un solo hecho. Pues llámese de arma de fuego, gente que ha sido decapitada, gente que ha sido mutilada de alguna parte de su cuerpo.
Vamos a un evento.
¿Qué pasó?
¿Trae la dirección?
So we were literally just conducting an interview with a criminalist on the forensics team here, and he came out and he said there's a shooting, so we're going to follow that team to the site.
My parents live in that neighborhood, so it's pretty scary always, because you always think he might be one of your friends, or you might know that person. You never know. You never know what you're gonna get. Yeah, that's the way it is.
We arrived at the crime scene just as the forensics team was walking in. A doctor had been shot by 2 guys with assault rifles who stormed his office and gunned him down. Is this just normal? You've just been...
normal ver ese tipo de cosas aquí?
Por supuesto, es lo más normal. Él fue bien, fue uno. Aquí matan por puño.
That's his daughter.
It's his daughter?
Yeah.
I think that's his wife, and the daughter's in the car. It's hard and disturbing to think that this scene happens here every day, multiple times a day. Among all the different cartels, who is winning?
Nadie. Nadie está ganando la guerra. Es una guerra de baja intensidad. Digo, comparada con otras guerras, no se van a hacer nada. Puede pasar una década y van a sobrevivir los cárteles. Son demasiado fuertes sus estructuras, no se van a hacer daño, digo, van a seguirse matando, pero las estructuras van a permanecer.
So Miguel, what are you hearing?
Someone from mine, the contact, he just called me. There is a shooting right now going on about outside a supermarket, about 2 miles from here, and there is 2 dead bodies over there.
Mitch, come here. Do Do you see the shell casings right here? Right here, you can see the bullet casings right here. They're all over. Let's go around this way. Okay. Hurry before they close the line. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Allá afuera trae el cordón, por favor, oiga, por favor.
Oh my God!
Hágame el favor, hija, por favor. Allá afuera, por favor, ya. Jefe.
Did you see that?
Allá afuera, por favor, oiga.
Oh my
Allá afuera el
God!
cordón, por favor, ya.
Whoa!
Afuera el cordón, oiga, por favorcito, allá afuera, por favor.
So you could see that. So you can just see that there were two people in the car and they were just mutilated.
She's crying. That's her son. That's her son. Leave me alone. That's my son. He's cursing the killers.
She's cursing the killers.
The killers. I curse the killers wherever they are. Why you stole this from me? Why?
Even though a couple people were just murdered in this parking lot, the supermarket is still open and people are still doing their grocery shopping. Do you think that things will get better? Do you have hope?
No. No creo, y menos aquí en Culiacán.
There's another shooting right now.
There's another shooting right now?
On the other side of the other part of town, it's one dead person.
Another person is dead in another part of town.
Yeah.
But we'd seen enough and couldn't rush off to one more murder in a country where killings have become just a normal part of life.